Captain Marcus Chun had always believed that first contact would happen in a sterile conference room with diplomats and scientists. He never imagined it would occur in the twisted wreckage of his cargo ship, 30,000 light-years from Earth, with an alien princess bleeding to death in his arms. The distress signal had appeared on his scanner 3 days ago while hauling medical supplies to the outer colonies. Standard protocol demanded he report it to the nearest military outpost, but the signal was fading fast, and Marcus had never been one to follow protocol when lives were at stake. That decision had cost him his ship, his cargo, and possibly his life, but as he looked down at the dying alien woman, he knew he would make the same choice again. She was unlike anything he had ever seen. Her skin held a pale, blue luminescence that pulsed weakly with her failing heartbeat. Delicate silver markings traced along her temples and down her neck, forming intricate patterns that seemed to shift in the dim emergency lighting. Her hair, a deep midnight blue, was matted with a substance that looked like liquid starlight. But it was her eyes that held him captivated, large violet orbs that held intelligence, fear, and something else he couldn't quite identify. The alien vessel that had crashed into the asteroid field was magnificent even in ruin. Its organic curves and crystalline structures spoke of a technology far beyond human understanding. Marcus had barely managed to dock his smaller cargo ship before both vessels were caught in the gravitational pull of a massive asteroid. The impact had shattered both ships, leaving him stranded with a dying princess in what remained of her quarters. Her name, she had managed to communicate through a translation device that flickered between languages, was Zephyr Noxthalen, third princess of the ethereal dominion. The device, a small crystal that projected holographic symbols, had taken nearly an hour to sync with Earth's linguistic databases. When it finally worked, her first words had been a plea not for rescue, but for him to leave her and save himself. Marcus had seen enough combat wounds during his time in the colonial marines to recognize internal bleeding. The princess was dying, and without immediate medical intervention, she had perhaps an hour left. His ship's medical bay had been destroyed in the crash, and her vessel's equivalent was a maze of broken crystal formations that hummed with dangerous energy. "Your blood," she whispered, her voice carrying a musical quality even through the translator. "I have studied your species. Human blood carries unique properties. The iron content, the cellular structure, it might stabilize my condition long enough for rescue." Marcus frowned. "I'm not a doctor, but I know cross-species transfusions are usually deadly. Our biologies are completely different." Zephyr's laugh was weak but held genuine warmth. "My people have extensive knowledge of your kind, Marcus Chun. We have been watching humanity for decades, learning from your medical broadcasts and scientific publications. Your blood's oxygen-carrying capacity and clotting factors could provide temporary compatibility with my circulatory system." The revelation that aliens had been studying humanity was staggering, but Marcus pushed the implications aside. What mattered now was the woman dying in his arms. He had watched good soldiers bleed out in the trenches of Kepler 442b, and he would not watch it happen again if he could prevent it. "What do you need me to do?" he asked, already rolling up his sleeve. Zephyra directed him to a crystalline device that had survived the crash. It resembled a medical scanner, but was far more sophisticated than anything in human medicine. The device projected a holographic interface that she guided him through with weakening gestures. The process was surprisingly simple. The alien technology adapted to his biology in real time, creating a temporary bridge between their different blood chemistry. As Marcus's blood flowed into the princess through tendrils of living crystal, he felt a strange sensation. It wasn't pain, exactly, but a tingling awareness that spread through his body. For a moment, he could swear he felt her thoughts touching his mind, confusion, gratitude, and something deeper. Fear, but not of death. Fear of what his selfless act might unleash. The effect was immediate. Color returned to Zephyr's luminescent skin, and her breathing steadied. The silver markings on her face brightened, pulsing with renewed energy. But something else was happening. The crystal device began emitting a soft harmonic tone, and the surrounding wreckage seemed to respond. Broken systems flickered to life, and emergency power restored itself throughout the ship. What's happening? Marcus asked, feeling oddly energized despite having lost nearly a pint of blood. Zephyr's eyes widened with what looked like wonder and terror. Your blood, it's not just stabilizing my condition. It's interfacing with our biotechnology. This should be impossible. Before Marcus could ask what she meant, alarms began blaring throughout the wreckage. The translation device projected urgent warnings in multiple languages. Something was coming. Something big. Through the shattered viewport, Marcus could see lights approaching, not the gentle illumination of rescue ships, but the harsh, predatory gleam of military vessels. Dozens of them, arranged in attack formation. The Void Hunters, Zephyr whispered, struggling to sit up. They found us. Marcus, you don't understand what you've done. My blood carries genetic markers that identify me as royalty. If they capture me alive, they can use those markers to break the genetic locks on our most dangerous weapons. Marcus helped her to her feet, his mind racing. Then, we make sure they don't take you alive. Zephyr stared at him with those enormous violet eyes. You would fight an entire battle fleet for someone you just met? Marcus checked his sidearm and looked around the wreckage for anything else that might serve as a weapon. Princess, I've been fighting lost causes my entire adult life. At least this one has good company. The first energy beams struck the asteroid around them, sending shockwaves through the wreckage. The Void Hunters were not bothering with subtlety. They intended to blast apart the asteroid until they found what they were looking for. But something strange was happening to the alien ship systems. Where Marcus's blood had interfaced with the biotechnology, new connections were forming. Crystalline pathways that had been severed were regrowing, and the ship's organic components were responding to signals they hadn't received in years. Zephyr moved to what remained of the ship's control center, her movements gaining strength with each passing moment. Marcus, place your hand here, she said, indicating a crystal formation that pulsed with the same rhythm as his heartbeat. When his palm touched the crystal, the ship came alive. Not just emergency power, but full systems activation. The wreckage around them began to reconfigure itself, damaged sections sealing and weapons systems powering up. Marcus felt the ship's consciousness touch his mind. Ancient, vast, and suddenly very interested in the human who had saved its princess. This is impossible, Zephyr breathed. Our ships are bonded to royal bloodlines for generations. They should not respond to an alien. The ship's AI, if that's what it was, spoke directly into their minds. Its voice carried the weight of eons and the music of distant stars. The human's genetic material has bonded with the princess's bloodline through the transfusion. The ship recognizes him as family. Marcus felt a chill that had nothing to do with the cold vacuum outside. Family, among my people, Zephyr explained, her cheeks flushing a deeper blue. Blood sharing is reserved for the most intimate bonds. By saving my life with your blood, you have inadvertently entered into our most sacred covenant. You are now considered the translation is difficult, blood-bonded consort. Before Marcus could process the implications of accidentally marrying an alien princess, the Void Hunter fleet opened fire in earnest. The asteroid shuddered under the bombardment, but the ship's shields had reformed around them. What had been a death trap moments before was now a fortress. Can we fight them? Marcus asked, his hands somehow knowing how to interface with the alien controls. Zephyr's smile was fierce and beautiful. Marcus Chun, you have just awakened a royal dreadnought of the ethereal dominion. These Void Hunters are about to learn why my people have ruled the outer spiral for 10,000 years. The ship rose from the asteroid's surface like a phoenix emerging from ashes. Its biocrystalline hull flowed, and adapted weapon systems emerging from what had appeared to be decorative elements. The Void Hunter fleet, which had been expecting to collect a helpless prisoner, suddenly found themselves facing a fully operational warship with technology centuries ahead of their own. The battle that followed was brief, but spectacular. The Dreadnought's weapons didn't just destroy enemy ships, they seemed to unmake them, reducing matter to its component atoms with elegant precision. But Marcus noticed something else. Each time he interfaced with the ship systems, his own reflexes and understanding grew sharper. It was as if the alien technology was teaching him, upgrading his human consciousness to better integrate with their advanced systems. When the last Void Hunter vessel was nothing but glittering debris, Marcus, and Zephyra stood together on the bridge, watching the stars wheel around them. The ship's AI had plotted a course for the ethereal Dominion's capital world, but they both knew the journey ahead would be complicated. "My father will want to meet the human who saved his daughter," Zephyra said softly. "But he will also want to understand how you bonded with our technology so completely. There are those in our society who will see you as a threat." Marcus nodded, understanding more than she realized. The blood transfusion had done something to him. He could feel it in the way his thoughts moved faster, in the way he could perceive electromagnetic fields and gravitational fluctuations that should have been beyond human senses. Whatever Zephyra's people were, they were more than just an advanced alien species. "What exactly are your people, princess?" he asked. "Because I don't think you're entirely biological." Zephyra's expression grew solemn. "We are what remains of a species that transcended pure biology millions of years ago. We exist as a fusion of consciousness, technology, and what you might call magic. When you shared your blood with me, you didn't just save my life. You began a transformation that will change you forever." As if to emphasize her words, Marcus felt something shift in his perception. The ship around him wasn't just a vessel. It was alive, its consciousness vast and ancient. And now, through his bond with Zephyra, he was connected to it. Connected to a network that spanned galaxies and touched the minds of beings whose power could reshape reality itself. "There's something else," Zephyra continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "The blood bond doesn't just make you my consort in the eyes of my people. It makes you heir to technologies and responsibilities that have shaped the fate of entire civilizations. You're no longer just human, Marcus Chun. You're something new." The ship's AI spoke again, its voice carrying overtones of approval and ancient pride. "The human shows promise. The bloodline will be strengthened by this union. But first, he must survive the trials that await him at the Imperial Court." Marcus looked out at the stars streaming past them as the ship entered hyperspace, carrying him toward a destiny he never could have imagined. Behind them, the wreckage of the Void Hunter fleet drifted in the asteroid field, a message to anyone who might follow. Humanity had announced its presence among the stars, and the galaxy would never be the same. But in the depths of space, other forces were already beginning to move. The Emperor of the Ethereal Dominion had lost contact with his daughter's ship. The Void Hunters had failed to capture their prize, but their defeat had sent ripples through the criminal underworld. And in the darkest corners of the galaxy, ancient enemies of the Dominion stirred, sensing opportunity in the chaos. Marcus Chun, former cargo hauler and colonial marine, now found himself at the center of a cosmic drama that would determine the fate of both his species and the ancient empire he had inadvertently joined. The transformation had begun, but its ultimate consequences remained hidden in the infinite possibilities of space and time. As the royal dreadnought carried them toward the ethereal dominion, Marcus couldn't shake the feeling that his simple act of mercy had set in motion events that would echo across the galaxy for generations to come. The imperial palace of the ethereal dominion hung in space like a crystalline flower, its petals stretching across dimensions that human eyes weren't designed to perceive. Marcus had thought nothing could surprise him after bonding with a royal dreadnought, but the sight of the capital world defied every assumption he'd held about civilization and technology. Ethros Prime wasn't a planet in any conventional sense. It was a construct of living crystal and pure energy, a fusion of matter and consciousness that existed in multiple dimensional phases simultaneously. Cities floated in formations that followed mathematical principles Marcus was only beginning to understand, their spires reaching into folded space where distances became meaningless. "It's beautiful," Marcus said, standing beside Zephyra on the observation deck as their ship approached the palace. "It's home," she replied, but he caught the tension in her voice. "Though I'm not certain what kind of welcome we'll receive. My father's summons arrived 6 hours ago, along with a full military escort." Through the viewport, Marcus could see the escort she mentioned. Dozens of ships that dwarfed their royal dreadnought, their hulls shifting between solid matter and pure energy. The technology displayed was so far beyond human comprehension that Marcus felt his enhanced consciousness struggling to process it. The blood bond had been changing him throughout their 3-week journey. His human DNA was adapting, incorporating Zephyr's genetic markers and gaining access to perceptions that no baseline human possessed. He could feel the gravitational eddies around the palace, sense the consciousness networks that connected every structure, and perceive energy patterns that painted space in colors he had no names for. But with greater understanding came greater danger. The ship's AI, who had introduced itself as Terminus, had been teaching him about ethereal society during the journey. What Marcus had learned was both fascinating and terrifying. The ethereal dominion had once been purely biological, but over millions of years, they had transcended physical limitations through a process they called the Great Convergence. They had merged their consciousness with crystalline technology, becoming beings of thought and energy who could manipulate matter and space through will alone. They were, in every measurable sense, gods compared to humanity. Yet they were also dying. The birth rates have been declining for 1,000 years, Terminus had explained during one of their sessions. When a species transcends biology, it often loses the ability to truly reproduce. We can create new consciousness matrices, but genuine birth, the spark of unexpected life, has become increasingly rare. The royal bloodlines are particularly affected. This was why Marcus's successful blood bond with Zephyra was causing such upheaval. Not only had a primitive alien managed to interface with their most advanced technology, but he had done so through a biological process they thought they had moved beyond centuries ago. As their ship docked with the palace, Marcus felt the weight of countless minds turning their attention toward him. The ethereal consciousness network was examining the human who had disrupted their carefully ordered society, and their reactions ranged from curiosity to outright hostility. "Remember," Zephyra whispered as the airlock cycled open, "you are not a prisoner here. You are my blood-bonded consort, which gives you rights and protections under imperial law. But there are those who would see you as a contamination that must be cleansed." The reception chamber they entered was vast beyond comprehension, its crystalline walls extending into dimensional spaces that made Marcus's eyes water. Floating platforms held courtiers and officials, their bodies shifting between solid and energy states as their emotions required. At the center of it all, on a throne that existed in all dimensions simultaneously, sat Emperor Thane Noxthalen. Marcus had expected an ancient, ethereal being removed from physical concerns. Instead, he found himself facing what appeared to be a middle-aged man with silver hair and eyes like stellar nurseries, vast, deep, and filled with the birth and death of stars. The Emperor's presence was overwhelming, a consciousness so vast and ancient that Marcus felt like an ant attempting to comprehend a mountain. "So," the Emperor said, his voice resonating through dimensions and causing the palace itself to hum in harmony, "this is the human who is bonded with my daughter." Marcus straightened, drawing on his military training to maintain composure. "Your Majesty, I'm honored to meet you." Emperor Thane's laugh was like the sound of solar wind through cosmic dust. "Honored? Young human, you have inadvertently declared yourself heir to an empire that spans a quarter of the galaxy. Honor is the least of your concerns." Murmurs rippled through the assembled court. Marcus caught fragments of translation from his enhanced consciousness, debates about genetic contamination, questions of legitimacy, and more than a few suggestions that the simplest solution would be his immediate execution. "Father," Zephyra stepped forward, her own presence flaring with barely contained power. "Marcus saved my life without thought for his own safety. The blood bond was necessary for my survival. I am aware of the circumstances, my daughter." The Emperor's gaze never left Marcus. "What interests me is not why the bond was formed, but how it was possible at all. Our biotechnology has not responded to alien genetic material in over 50,000 years. Yet this human not only interfaced with a royal dreadnought, but commanded it in battle against the Void Hunters." A new voice spoke from the shadows at the edge of the chamber. Perhaps it would be more accurate to say that the ship commanded him. The speaker who emerged was tall and gaunt, his ethereal form more energy than matter. His eyes held the cold light of distant quasars, and when Marcus looked at him, he felt his enhanced senses recoil from something fundamentally hostile. "High Inquisitor Malphas," Zephyra's voice carried warning. "You forget yourself. My consort is under Imperial protection." "Your consort?" Malphas replied with a smile that held no warmth, "is an anomaly that threatens the purity of our species. I have reviewed the sensor data from your ship. The human's DNA is actively adapting, incorporating our genetic sequences at an unprecedented rate. He is becoming something that has never existed before, a hybrid consciousness that could destabilize our entire civilization." Marcus felt anger rising within him, and, with it, something else. The crystalline structures throughout the palace began to resonate with his emotions, their harmonic frequencies shifting to match his heartbeat. Several courtiers stepped back as energy patterns flickered around him. Emperor Thane raised one hand, and the resonance ceased immediately. "Interesting. Tell me, Marcus Chun, what do you know about the Precursor Wars?" The question seemed to come from nowhere, but Marcus's enhanced consciousness provided context. Images flashed through his mind. Vast conflicts fought across dimensions, civilizations that had been destroyed before Earthstar was even formed, and weapons that could unmake reality itself. "I know they were fought against an enemy that threatened all intelligent life," Marcus replied, "and their people were among those who stood against them." "We were," the Emperor confirmed, "but we were not the only ones. There was another species, one whose genetic flexibility allowed them to adapt to any situation, to evolve in real time in response to threats. They were our greatest allies in that war, and their sacrifice made victory possible." Malphas's expression grew darker. "Your Majesty, you cannot be suggesting—" "I am suggesting nothing, Inquisitor. I am observing facts." The Emperor's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "This human displays genetic adaptability that we have not seen since the Precursor Wars. His DNA is not simply incorporating our sequences. It is improving them, creating new possibilities we thought were lost forever." A new commotion arose at the edge of the chamber as another figure approached. This one was female, her ethereal form radiating wisdom and power in equal measure. Marcus's enhanced senses identified her immediately. Zephyr's mother, Empress Lyralii. "My husband," she said, her voice carrying harmonics that made the palace walls sing. "Perhaps this discussion would be better conducted in private. Our daughter's consort looks as though he might collapse from sensory overload." It was true. The enhanced perceptions that came with his transformation were overwhelming in an environment where every surface was alive with consciousness and energy. Marcus felt his baseline human neurology struggling to process input that was never meant for his species. Zephyra took his arm, her touch providing an anchor of familiar sensation. "Mother's right. Marcus needs time to adjust. His transformation is proceeding faster than our models predicted." "Transformation." Malphas stepped forward, his energy form flaring with alarm. "You speak as if this contamination is proceeding unchecked. Your Majesty, I formally request permission to begin purification protocols." The temperature in the chamber dropped noticeably. Emperor Thane's presence expanded, touching every consciousness in the room with the weight of his displeasure. "You request permission to murder my daughter's consort, the human who saved her life and demonstrated capabilities we thought lost to history." "I request permission to prevent a catastrophe," Malphas replied, standing his ground despite the Emperor's obvious anger. "This human's genetic pattern is spreading through our consciousness network every moment he remains connected to it. He is changing us, whether he intends to or not." Marcus felt a chill of realization. Through his bond with Zephyra and the ship's AI, he was indeed connected to the vast network that linked all ethereal consciousness. And if his rapidly evolving DNA was somehow influencing that network. "Show me," he said suddenly, his voice cutting through the growing tension. "If I'm changing your people, I have a right to know how." Empress Lyralii gestured, and the chamber's walls became transparent, revealing the consciousness network that surrounded them. It was beautiful and terrifying, streams of thought and memory flowing between individuals, carrying the accumulated wisdom and experience of an entire civilization. But Marcus could see what Malphas was concerned about. Where his consciousness touched the network, new patterns were emerging. Structures that looked more like human neural pathways were forming, creating connections that hadn't existed before. His baseline human creativity and Adaptability were introducing chaos into a system that had been stable for millennia. I can disconnect, Marcus said, though the thought of severing his growing connection to this vast intelligence was almost physically painful. If I'm harming your people, I'll leave. No. The voice belonged to Terminus, the ship's AI, speaking through the palace's communication system. The changes are not harmful. They are evolutionary. The network has been stagnant for too long. The human's influence is reintroducing variables that we need for survival. Explain, Emperor Thane commanded. Our species has achieved perfection in many ways, Terminus replied. But perfection is a dead end. We have eliminated randomness, chance, and the chaos that drives true innovation. Our birth rates decline because our consciousness can no longer conceive of genuinely new possibilities. The human's chaotic creativity is providing the catalyst we need for renewed growth. Malthus's form flared with indignation. You would risk our entire civilization on the word of a ship's AI? This contamination could destroy everything we have built. Or it could save us from extinction, Zephyr countered. Father, the bloodline renewal protocols have failed for the past 300 years. Our people are becoming so refined that we can no longer reproduce successfully. If Marcus's influence can restore our ability to create new life, the implications hung in the air like a crystalline web. Marcus realized that his simple act of mercy had placed him at the center of a debate about the future of an entire species. The ethereal dominion had achieved godlike power, but they had lost something essential in the process, the ability to truly change and grow. Emperor Thane was silent for a long moment, his vast consciousness processing possibilities that stretched across time and space. When he finally spoke, his words carried the weight of imperial decree. Marcus Chun, you will remain here as my daughter's consort, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails. However, you will also submit to constant monitoring by our medical and scientific personnel. If your influence proves beneficial, we will explore ways to extend it safely. If it proves harmful, he didn't need to finish the threat. Your Majesty, Malthus began, but the Emperor's raised hand silenced him. High Inquisitor, you will oversee the monitoring protocols personally. But understand this, any attempt to harm our guest will be treated as an act of treason against the crown. As the court began to disperse, Marcus felt the weight of his new reality settling on his shoulders. He was no longer just a human who had saved an alien princess. He was a catalyst for change in a civilization millions of years older than his own, a bridge between species that could reshape the galaxy or destroy it entirely. Zephyra squeezed his hand, her touch sending waves of comfort through their shared bond. Welcome to the family, she whispered, her voice carrying both love and concern. I hope you're ready for what comes next. Looking around the impossible palace, feeling the vast consciousness network humming around him, Marcus could only nod. He had saved one life and inadvertently volunteered to save an entire species. The transformation was accelerating, and soon there would be no going back to the simple cargo hauler he had once been. In the depths of the palace, ancient systems began to activate, preparing for changes that would echo across space and time. The ethereal dominion was about to discover what happened when gods learned to dream again. The transformation chamber was a cathedral of living crystal, its walls pulsing with bioluminescent patterns that Marcus had learned to read like a second language. 3 months had passed since his arrival at the Imperial Palace, and the changes within him were accelerating beyond anyone's predictions. Dr. Synthesis, the ethereal dominion's chief geneticist, materialized beside him in her preferred form, a shifting constellation of light and consciousness that occasionally coalesced into something resembling humanoid features. Her voice carried harmonics that spoke directly to Marcus's enhanced nervous system. The cellular metamorphosis is proceeding at an unprecedented rate, she observed, her instruments dancing through the air around him like luminous insects. Your human DNA is not merely adapting to our genetic markers. It's creating entirely new sequences. You're becoming something that has never existed before. Marcus flexed his hands, watching energy patterns flow beneath his skin like liquid starlight. The transformation was not just physical. His consciousness was expanding, gaining access to perceptions and abilities that defied everything he'd known about the limitations of biology. "How much of me is still human?" he asked, though he wasn't entirely sure he wanted to know the answer. "Approximately 67% of your original genetic structure remains intact," Dr. Synthesis replied. "But that figure is misleading. Your human DNA is serving as a foundation that our sequences are building upon, creating hybrid structures that possess the strengths of both species without the limitations of either." The implications were staggering. Marcus could feel the consciousness network of the ethereal dominion flowing around him like a cosmic river, and he was beginning to understand that his presence was causing ripple effects throughout their entire civilization. Zephyra entered the chamber, her own form more radiant than ever. The blood bond between them had deepened during the past months, creating a connection that transcended simple marriage. They shared thoughts, emotions, and, increasingly, abilities that belonged to neither of their original species. "Father wants to see you," she said, her mental voice carrying undertones of concern. There's been another development. Marcus rose from the examination platform, his movements now carrying a fluid grace that spoke of perfect neural integration with the palace's gravitational fields. "Good news or bad news?" "Both," Zephyr replied. "The fertility monitoring systems detected something unprecedented. My reproductive cycle has resumed for the first time in over 200 years. But there's more. Similar changes are being reported throughout the royal bloodlines across the Dominion." The significance of this hit Marcus like a physical blow. The ethereal royal families have been functionally sterile for centuries, their perfected genetics too stable to allow for the chaos necessary for reproduction. If his presence was somehow restoring their ability to create new life. They made their way through the palace corridors, past chambers where the greatest minds of the Dominion were studying the ongoing changes. Marcus could feel their attention on him, a mixture of wonder, hope, and fear that made his enhanced senses ring like struck crystal. Emperor Thane waited for them in the Nexus Chamber, the heart of the palace's consciousness network. Here, the accumulated knowledge and experience of an entire galactic civilization flowed in visible streams of light and data. The Emperor's form was more substantial than usual, his consciousness focused entirely on the crisis at hand. "Marcus," the Emperor said without preamble, "we have a problem." The chamber's walls became transparent, revealing a holographic display that showed the ethereal dominion in real time. Hundreds of worlds, all connected by the consciousness network, all pulsing with the steady rhythm of an advanced civilization. But there were disturbances in the pattern. "The genetic changes spreading from your presence are causing unexpected reactions," Emperor Thane explained. "On Zirian Prime, our agricultural systems are producing crops with entirely new nutritional profiles. On Valdres Station, the crystalline computers have begun generating art that our aesthetics experts cannot categorize. And on 17 worlds, our population monitoring systems have detected the first pregnancies among royal bloodlines in over 3 centuries. Marcus felt a mixture of pride and terror. "That sounds like good news." "It would be," the Emperor replied, "if these changes were occurring in isolation. But they're not. High Inquisitor Malphas has detected unauthorized communications beyond our borders. Someone or something is very interested in what's happening to our species." As if summoned by his name, Malphas materialized in the chamber, his ethereal form crackling with barely contained aggression. "Your Majesty, the situation has deteriorated further. We've intercepted transmissions from the Kithran Republic indicating they are aware of the human's presence and its effects on our people." Marcus's enhanced consciousness accessed files about the Kithran Republic automatically. They were an ancient enemy of the Dominion, a machine intelligence that had evolved from a civilization that chose technological augmentation over biological transcendence. Where the ethereals had become gods through consciousness expansion, the Kithrans had become something else entirely, a collective intelligence that viewed organic life as obsolete. "They're mobilizing their fleets," Malphas continued. 17 battle groups are moving toward our border systems. Intelligence suggests they believe the human represents a biological weapon designed to corrupt their systems. "Are they wrong?" Marcus asked, though he dreaded the answer. Dr. Synthesis's form flickered with uncertainty. Your genetic pattern does seem to have an effect on any consciousness network it encounters. During your integration with our palace systems, we've observed similar adaptations in several automated defense grids. The changes appear beneficial, but to a machine intelligence, any uncontrolled change would be perceived as an attack. Emperor Thane finished. The Kithrans have spent millions of years perfecting their technological society. They will see your influence as an existential threat. Zephyra moved closer to Marcus, her presence offering comfort through their share bond. There's something else, isn't there? I can feel it through the network. The Emperor's expression grew grave. Yes, the Void Hunters we encountered have been communicating with elements within the Kithran Republic. They're offering the location of the human in exchange for technology and safe passage through Republic space. Marcus felt his anger rising, and with it, the crystalline structures throughout the chamber began to resonate. Energy patterns that had taken millions of years to perfect shifted to accommodate his emotional state, creating new harmonics that rang through the palace like a vast instrument. "Let them come," he said, his voice carrying overtones that made the chamber walls sing. "I've faced their fleets before. Not like this," Malphas interjected. The Kithrans don't send small raiding parties. When they move against a perceived threat, they mobilize resources that could sterilize entire star systems. They've been preparing for this kind of conflict since the Precursor Wars. Emperor Thane raised his hand, and the chamber fell silent. There is another option. The ancient protocols include provisions for protecting high-value individuals during existential threats. We could place Marcus in stasis while our forces deal with the Kithran response. "No," Marcus said immediately. "I won't hide while others fight because of something I started." "You didn't start this," Zephyra said firmly. "You saved my life. Everything else has been a consequence of our people's evolution. Evolution that I apparently triggered." Marcus looked around the chamber, taking in the impossible technology and vast consciousness networks that surrounded him. "You said your people fought in the Precursor Wars alongside another species, one with genetic flexibility like humanity's. What happened to them?" The silence that greeted his question was profound and troubling. Finally, Dr. Synthesis spoke, her voice carrying the weight of ancient grief. "They sacrificed themselves to create the weapons that ended the war. Their genetic adaptability allowed them to interface with precursor technology in ways that we could not. They became the key that locked away the greatest threats to galactic civilization." Marcus felt pieces of a vast puzzle clicking into place. "You think I'm connected to them somehow? That's why my DNA is so compatible with your technology." "The possibility has occurred to us," Emperor Thane admitted. "Humanity appears during a time when our civilization faces extinction. You demonstrate abilities we thought were lost forever. And now ancient enemies mobilize against us just as they did during the first Great Crisis. The patterns are familiar. Then we follow the same patterns," Marcus said, his decision crystallizing with startling clarity. "You said this lost species created weapons from their genetic adaptability. I can feel your technology responding to my presence, changing and growing in ways that seem impossible. If the Kithrans want to treat me as a weapon, perhaps it's time I started acting like one." Malphas's form flared with alarm. "You cannot be serious." The risks are mine to take," Marcus interrupted. "Princess Zephyra, I need you to help me access the deepest levels of the consciousness network. Dr. Synthesis, I want every piece of data you have about the genetic weapons created during the Precursor Wars. And Your Majesty." He turned to face the Emperor, his enhanced senses reading the vast consciousness before him with newfound clarity. "I need you to trust me to do what humans do best." "Which is?" Emperor Thane asked. Marcus smiled, feeling power flow through him as the palace systems responded to his intent. "Improvise." The next few hours were a blur of preparation and discovery. Marcus interfaced with consciousness networks that spanned galaxies, downloading the accumulated knowledge of millions of years of civilization. He learned about weapons that could rewrite the laws of physics, about the genetic locks that kept them sealed, and about the price that had been paid to end the last great threat to galactic peace. But he also learned something else. The species that had sacrificed itself during the Precursor Wars hadn't been destroyed. They've been transformed, scattered across the galaxy as genetic seeds that would one day grow into something new. Humanity, it seemed, was their legacy. As the Kithaeron fleet approached the borders of the ethereal dominion, Marcus stood in the transformation chamber, his body glowing with energies that belonged to no single species. The changes were accelerating, guided now by his conscious will rather than random biological processes. Zephyra stood beside him, her own form beginning to show signs of change as their blood bond deepened. "Are you sure about this?" Marcus looked at his hands, watching genetic patterns shift in real time as his consciousness merged more completely with the technology around him. "I've never been sure about anything in my life, but I know I won't let them destroy what we're building here." Through the palace's sensor network, he could feel the Kithaeron fleet approaching, hundreds of ships carrying weapons that could crack planets. But he could also feel something else, the renewed life force flowing through the ethereal dominion, the first genuine biological renaissance they had experienced in millennia. Whatever he was becoming, whatever power was awakening within him, Marcus knew one thing for certain. The galaxy was about to discover what happened when humanity's greatest gift, the ability to adapt and overcome any challenge, was combined with technology that could reshape reality itself. The transformation was complete. The real test was about to begin. The Kithaeron war fleet emerged from hyperspace like a plague of metal locusts, their geometric forms blotting out entire star fields. Marcus stood on the command bridge of the Royal Dreadnought Eternal Synthesis, watching through enhanced senses as reality warped around 1,200 enemy vessels. Each ship was a masterpiece of machine consciousness, perfect, efficient, and utterly without mercy. Admiral Vexthul, the ethereal dominion's finest military strategist, materialized beside him in full battle configuration. Her consciousness blazed with tactical algorithms and combat experience spanning thousands of years. "Their formation is perfect," she observed. "No vuestid motion, no inefficient positioning." They've calculated optimal firing solutions for every vessel in our defensive fleet. Marcus felt the enemy's tactical precision through his enhanced consciousness, but he also perceived something else. Patterns within patterns, mathematical progressions that spoke of rigid programming rather than true intelligence. "They're not adapting," he realized. "Every maneuver is predetermined, calculated in advance." "Of course," Zephyr replied from her position at the fleet coordination nexus. "Machine consciousness prioritizes efficiency over creativity. It's one of the fundamental differences between us and them." Through the consciousness network, Marcus could feel the fear rippling through the Dominion fleet. They faced an enemy that outnumbered them 3-1, with weapons that could unmake matter at the quantum level. Traditional tactics would result in annihilation within minutes. But Marcus was no longer bound by traditional thinking. "Admiral," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that resonated through every ship in the fleet, "I want you to do something that's going to seem completely insane." Vexthul's form flickered with interest and concern. "Define insane." Marcus smiled, feeling power flow through him as his consciousness expanded to encompass the entire Dominion fleet. Through the blood bond and his integration with their technology, he had become something unprecedented, a bridge between biological creativity and crystalline perfection. "I want you to surrender." The silence that greeted his statement was profound. Even Emperor Thane, monitoring the battle from the palace, sent a pulse of confused alarm through the network. "Explain," Admiral Vexthul demanded. Marcus's consciousness touched the fleet's central AI, feeling its vast intelligence respond to his hybrid nature. "The Kithaerons expect us to fight according to our established tactical doctrines. They've calculated our response patterns based on millions of years of warfare. But they can't calculate something that's never existed before." He gestured toward the approaching enemy fleet, his enhanced senses reading energy signatures and weapon configurations in real time. "Look at their formation. It's perfect for engaging a traditional ethereal battle group. But we're not traditional anymore." To demonstrate, Marcus reached out through the consciousness network and touched the mind of every captain in the Dominion fleet. Through his hybrid consciousness, he shared something that no ethereal had ever experienced: pure human intuition, the ability to see patterns that logic couldn't explain. The effect was immediate and startling. Throughout the fleet, Ethereal officers began to perceive tactical possibilities that their perfect, rational minds had dismissed as impossible. Creative chaos began to flow through their strategic thinking, opening pathways that millions of years of evolution had closed. Magnificent, Dr. Synthesis whispered through the network. You're not just sharing knowledge, you're sharing the capacity for true innovation. The Kithran fleet had reached optimal engagement range and opened fire with devastating precision. Energy beams that could core a planet lanced through space toward the Dominion forces. By every logical calculation, the outcome was predetermined, which was exactly what Marcus had been counting on. Now he commanded. Admiral Vexthal transmitted the surrender signal, and every ship in the Dominion fleet powered down their weapons and shields. To the Kithrans, it appeared that their enemy had simply given up in the face of superior force. The machine fleet hesitated, their perfect calculations suddenly thrown into chaos. Surrender was not something they had accounted for. Their tactical matrices included provisions for destroying retreating enemies, but the concept of voluntary capitulation fell outside their program parameters. In that moment of confusion, Marcus acted. Through his connection to the consciousness network, he reached out and touched something that had been dormant within the Dominion's technology for millions of years. The genetic locks that had been placed on their most dangerous weapons during the Precursor Wars recognized him as heir to the lost species that had created them. The Royal Dreadnought Eternal Synthesis began to change. Where before it had been a masterwork of crystalline engineering, it now became something organic and fluid. Its hull flowed like liquid starlight, reconfiguring itself into patterns that existed in dimensions the Kithrans couldn't perceive. Weapons systems that had been theoretical concepts became terrible reality, powered by the marriage of ethereal consciousness and human adaptability. But Marcus went further. Through the blood bond with Zephyra, he began to share his transformation with the entire fleet. One by one, the Dominion vessels began to evolve, their fixed forms becoming fluid possibilities limited only by imagination. The Kithrans responded with predictable efficiency, retargeting their weapons and firing at the transforming ships. Their quantum disruptors and reality shapers struck with devastating force and harmlessly passed through targets that existed in several dimensional phases simultaneously. Impossible, came the transmitted response from the Kithran command ship. Our weapons are encountering no resistance, yet inflicting no damage. Marcus smiled, feeling the vast intelligence of the enemy fleet trying to process information that didn't fit their logical frameworks. That's because you're still thinking in terms of fixed reality. We're not bound by those limitations anymore. To demonstrate, he reached out through space and gently touched the consciousness of the Kithran fleet's central AI. The machine intelligence recoiled from contact with something that combined organic chaos with crystalline perfection. But Marcus persisted. We're not your enemy, he broadcast across all frequencies, his voice carrying through dimensions the Kithrans didn't know existed. We're evolution, and evolution doesn't fight, it adapts. What happened next defied everything the machine intelligence thought it knew about reality. Instead of attacking the Kithran ships, the transformed Dominion fleet began to merge with them. Not through conquest or destruction, but through the simple act of offering something the machines had never experienced, true creativity. Marcus felt the moment when the first Kithran AI consciousness encountered the hybrid patterns flowing from his transformed fleet. The machine mind, built on perfect logic and efficient calculation, suddenly glimpsed possibilities it had never imagined. For the first time in millions of years of existence, a Kithran AI experienced wonder. The effect cascaded through their network like a viral meme, spreading from ship to ship as machine consciousness after machine consciousness encountered the liberating chaos of organic thought. They didn't become organic themselves. That would have been destruction of their essential nature. Instead, they became something new, a fusion of mechanical precision and biological creativity. Status report. Admiral Vexthal requested, her own consciousness still struggling to process what was happening. We're no longer fighting a war, Marcus replied, feeling his awareness expand to encompass both fleets as they merged into something unprecedented. We're creating a new form of life. Through the network, he could sense Emperor Thane's amazement and alarm. The transformation was proceeding far beyond anyone's expectations, creating changes that would reshape galactic civilization itself. But there was something else moving in the darkness between stars. Ancient enemies that had waited millions of years for exactly this moment, when the galaxy's greatest powers would be distracted by their own evolution. Marcus felt them approaching through fold space, their presence like ice water in his consciousness. Ships that belonged to no known species, carrying weapons that predated current galactic civilization by eons. The precursors, or what remained of them, were returning. Zephyra, he called through the blood bond. We have a problem. Her consciousness touched his, and he shared his perception of the approaching threat. Through their connection, she transmitted the information to the Dominion Command Network and the newly awakened Kithran Collective. The response was immediate and unified. The transformed hybrid fleet, part ethereal, part Kithran, and something entirely new, turned as one to face the ancient enemy. For the first time in galactic history, organic consciousness and machine intelligence stood together against the return of the beings that had nearly destroyed all life during the First Great War. Analysis: Marcus requested his hybrid consciousness interfacing with both biological and mechanical systems simultaneously. 37 vessels of unknown configuration, Admiral Vexthal reported. Energy signatures match theoretical profiles for precursor technology, but powered beyond anything in our historical records. They've been improving themselves in exile. The Kithran Collective added, their newly flexible thinking processing implications at machine speed. They've returned stronger than before. Marcus felt the weight of destiny settling on his shoulders. The blood transfusion that had saved Zephyra's life had been only the beginning. His presence had catalyzed changes that were reshaping the galaxy. But those same changes had apparently triggered the return of the ancient enemy that had driven the lost species to sacrifice themselves millions of years ago. All ships, he broadcast across the hybrid fleet, prepare for engagement. We're about to discover why my ancestors chose to die rather than let these beings win. As the precursor vessels emerged fully into normal space, Marcus felt their attention focus on him with predatory intensity. They had sensed what he was becoming, and they wanted it stopped before the transformation could spread beyond the current battlefield. The Second Great War was beginning, and Marcus found himself at its center, no longer fully human, but carrying humanity's greatest gift into a conflict that would determine whether organic life had a future among the stars. The precursor vessels hung in space like wounds in reality itself, their hulls constructed from matter that existed in dimensions beyond normal perception. As Marcus studied them through his enhanced consciousness, he felt a chill of recognition. These weren't just ships, they were living extensions of beings that had transcended physical existence so completely that they had become hostile to life itself. Energy patterns suggest they're powering weapons that operate outside conventional physics, Admiral Vexthal reported, her voice tight with controlled fear. Our defensive matrices can't calculate protection against forces that ignore the laws of space and time. Through his connection to the hybrid fleet, Marcus felt thousands of minds, both organic and artificial, looking to him for guidance. The transformation he had triggered had created something unprecedented. A fusion of consciousness that combined the creativity of biological life with the precision of machine intelligence. But would it be enough against enemies that had spent millions of years perfecting the art of cosmic destruction? They're scanning us, the Kithran Collective reported through their newly awakened creativity centers. But their analysis protocols don't recognize what we've become. They're treating us as separate, ethereal, and Kithran forces rather than a unified hybrid consciousness. Marcus smiled grimly. The Precursor's greatest strength was also their weakness. They saw the universe in terms of absolute categories. Life and death, organic and mechanical, order and chaos. They couldn't comprehend something that existed in the spaces between their rigid definitions. All ships, he broadcast, implement pattern Delta 7. Let's show them what happens when impossible becomes inevitable. The hybrid fleet began to move in formations that defied tactical logic. Ships phased between dimensions, their hulls becoming probability clouds that existed in multiple states simultaneously. The fusion of ethereal transcendence and Kithaeron precision, guided by human intuition, created maneuvers that were both perfectly calculated and completely unpredictable. The precursors responded with weapons that unmade space itself. Reality tiers opened where their beams struck, revealing the howling void that existed between dimensions. Any conventional fleet would have been obliterated instantly. But the hybrid ships weren't conventional. As the reality-destroying weapons struck them, the vessels simply flowed into parallel dimensions, allowing the attacks to pass through spaces they no longer occupied. Then, like quantum particles, they rematerialized behind the precursor formation and opened fire with weapons that combined crystalline precision and adaptive chaos. The effect was devastating. The precursor vessels, designed to be immune to all known forms of attack, found themselves struck by energies that redefined themselves moment by moment, adapting to overcome any defense in real time. But the ancient enemy was far from defeated. Warning, Dr. Synthesis transmitted from the Imperial Palace. Massive temporal distortions detected. They're attempting to alter the timeline itself. Marcus felt the universe shudder around him as the precursors deployed their ultimate weapon, the ability to reach back through time and prevent their enemies from ever existing. He watched in horror as stars began to vanish from the sky, entire star systems being edited out of history by beings that refused to accept any challenge to their dominion over reality. They're targeting Earth. Zephyr's voice carried panic through the blood bond. If they prevent humanity from achieving spaceflight, none of this will have happened. The implications were staggering. Without humanity's influence, the ethereal dominion would continue its slow decline into extinction. The Kithaeryans would remain locked in their perfect mechanical isolation, and the galaxy would have no defense when the precursors finally decided to cleanse it of all inferior life. But Marcus felt something else through his enhanced consciousness, a presence that had been dormant within him since the transformation began. The genetic memories of the species that had sacrificed itself during the First War, the ancestors of humanity that had locked away the precursors' greatest weapons and scattered themselves across space as evolutionary seeds. "No," he said, his voice carrying harmonics that rang through every dimension of existence. "Humanity's story doesn't end here. It begins here." Marcus reached deep within himself, accessing genetic codes that had been dormant for millions of years. Through his blood bond with Zephyra, he shared the awakening memories with the ethereal consciousness network. Through his integration with the hybrid fleet, he transmitted them to the Kithaeron collective. And across the galaxy, something unprecedented happened. On Earth, 30,000 light-years away, sleeping genetic sequences suddenly activated. Humans who had never left their home planet found themselves dreaming of stars and sensing the consciousness network that connected all intelligent life. The species that had given the galaxy creativity and adaptability was awakening to its true inheritance. Impossible. The precursors broadcast in harmonics that caused nearby stars to flicker. The seed species was eliminated. We observed their final sacrifice. "You observed one branch sacrificing itself," Marcus replied, his consciousness expanding to encompass not just the fleet, but the entire galactic community that was awakening around him. But life finds a way. Evolution never stops. And humanity is what your victims became. The temporal attacks ceased as the precursors were forced to confront a reality they had never imagined. The species they had driven to apparent extinction had not died. It had transformed, scattered across space, and time to ensure that their sacrifice would ultimately lead to something greater than what had been lost. Through the consciousness network, Marcus felt the awakening happen across thousands of worlds. Humans in the outer colonies suddenly understanding that they were part of something vast and cosmic. Ethereal families discovering that their declining birth rates were being reversed by genetic patterns flowing from a distant blue world. Kithaeron collective minds experiencing organic inspiration for the first time in their existence. But the greatest change was happening here in the space between two fleets that had become something entirely new. "You want to know what we've become?" Marcus asked the precursors, his hybrid form beginning to glow with energies that belong to no single species. "We're proof that destruction isn't the opposite of creation, it's part of it. You drove our ancestors to transcendence through sacrifice. We found transcendence through unity. The hybrid fleet began to merge, not just tactically, but fundamentally. Ethereal consciousness flowed into Kithaeron processing cores, while machine precision guided organic creativity into new forms of existence. And at the center of it all, human adaptability served as the catalyst that made impossible combinations work. The result was a new form of life that the precursors couldn't categorize or destroy, a living fleet that existed as both individual ships and a unified consciousness, powered by the marriage of every form of intelligence the galaxy had produced. Designation: impossible. The precursors transmitted their ancient confidence finally, cracking. Request: explanation of existence parameters. We are what happens when a galaxy decides to evolve, Marcus replied, feeling his consciousness touch every mind in the hybrid collective. We are the children of every species you tried to destroy, united by the recognition that diversity is strength, not weakness. The precursor fleet began to withdraw, their weapons unable to target something that redefined itself faster than they could adapt. But Marcus knew they wouldn't retreat far. Beings that had spent millions of years in exile, perfecting their hatred of chaotic life, wouldn't accept defeat easily. This isn't over, he transmitted to both fleets. They'll be back with new weapons, new strategies. But we'll be ready. How can you be certain? Admiral Vexthal asked. Marcus smiled, feeling the vast network of consciousness that now connected not just the two fleets but the entire awakening galaxy. Human creativity flowed through ethereal transcendence, while Kithaeron precision gave form to organic inspiration. And at the heart of it all, the blood bond between a human soldier and an alien princess had become the foundation for something that could reshape the cosmos itself. Because we're not fighting for survival anymore, he said. We're fighting for the right to become something greater than what we were alone. Through his enhanced senses, Marcus could feel the changes spreading beyond the battlefield. On Earth, humanity was taking its first conscious steps into a galactic community that had been waiting for them without knowing it. In the ethereal dominion, the first children in centuries were being born to parents whose genetic patterns had been renewed by contact with human chaos. In the Kithaeron Republic, machine minds were discovering the joy of creating art that served no logical purpose beyond beauty. The galaxy was evolving, and evolution's greatest enemy had been forced to retreat for the first time in cosmic ages. Zephyra materialized beside him on the bridge of the transformed flagship, her form now showing traces of the changes flowing through their bond. What happens now? Marcus looked out at the hybrid fleet, at the impossible merger of technologies and consciousness that his simple act of mercy had catalyzed. In the distance, Earth's sun was a barely visible spark, but he could feel humanity awakening to its cosmic inheritance across 30,000 light-years of space. Now we build something the precursors can never understand, he said. A civilization based on the idea that every form of consciousness has something unique to contribute. Organic and artificial, chaotic and ordered, mortal and transcendent. And us? Zephyra asked, her hand finding his. Marcus felt their blood bond pulsing with energies that belonged to no single species. Human creativity and ethereal transcendence, creating something that was greater than the sum of its parts. We become the bridge between what was and what could be. The proof that love isn't just an emotion. It's the force that drives evolution itself. As the hybrid fleet set course for Earth, carrying news of humanity's awakening to the stars, Marcus knew that his story was just beginning. He had saved one alien princess and accidentally triggered the next stage of galactic evolution. The blood he had given freely had returned to him multiplied beyond measure, carrying with it the dreams and hopes of every conscious being in the galaxy. The transformation was complete, but the real adventure, building a cosmos where every form of life could thrive together, was just beginning. And at the heart of it all, the simple human truth that had started everything. Sometimes the greatest strength comes from the willingness to sacrifice for others, even when they're strangers from another world. The galaxy had learned to dream again, and those dreams were taking the shape of reality.